when I was graduating from college, there was a group of people who came into church on Sunday in South Fontana, and they were, this is the church, they were there in South Fontana, and they received a note from their pastor. And the note said, I can't do this anymore. I'm moving. Don't try to find me. Like, I'm gone. Didn't talk to them. Just left. They were watching videos of Charles Stanley and other, online preachers and just trying to get through. And I'll never forget, I got a call and they said, hey, would you go down there and preach? And I remember getting there and just a handful of people there at that church that was still is a historical landmark for the city of Fontana. It was just an interesting thing. And I started preaching and I started realizing that it's very easy to preach from a false pretense. It's very easy to preach something, but it's harder to live it. It's very easy to make everything about yourself rather than to make everything about Jesus. And so there are people in the New Testament that did that. Diotrephes in 3 John, he loved to have the preeminence among them. And so they received John not. And so in verse 18, he talks about what was happening, that notwithstanding in every way, whether in pretense, whether there's false motives, whether there's a false and selfish justification, whether they're making allegations and excuses, whether it's pretense or in truth, verse 18 says, Christ is preached, and I therein do rejoice and will rejoice. He says, listen, I'm going to rejoice regardless of who's saying what about me, regardless of if I'm in prison or if I'm not in prison. Why? Because Christ is being magnified through me and through the gospel being preached. Paul didn't care what was happening to him. Paul wasn't concerned about his image. Paul wasn't concerned about what people thought about him. And Andrew Bonar, one of the great writers of the past, says, the best part of all Christian work is the part that only God sees. Only God sees some things. Only God looks at some things and sees some things that only we know that we're doing. And so it needs to be enough that God notices. We need not live our lives as man-pleasers, just looking for the next person to please. But no, we need to magnify and please God. In verse number 19, it says, for I know that this shall turn to my salvation, meaning God's going to deliver me. Verse 20, it says that your prayer and your supply of the Spirit, what's it going to do? It's going to bring us to an earnest expectation of hope that we're not ashamed. We're not going to be ashamed because of what everyone is saying. Why? Because we're just preaching the gospel. We're magnifying Jesus. It's not about me. It's about Jesus.